The events here took place when I was an 11-year-old girl on vacation with my family. My mother, younger brother, and I went to Port Elizabeth to visit family. Being the only kids present meant we were more excited to play in the ocean than spend time indoors. My mom picked a sunny day. We packed our boogie boards and we headed to the nearest beach, with my grandma tagging along. My brother and I ran towards a set of stairs leading down to the beach. I stopped. There were eyes on me. I sensed it. Growing up in South Africa, you're taught to be vigilant. Notice your surroundings. Notice people especially. I looked around the crowd, trying to pinpoint what was setting off my radar. Then I found it. Two men, about 20 meters in front of me, about late 20s to early 30s. They were frozen in place, staring at me with big, toothy smiles on their faces. I returned a smile and a nod, acknowledging their presence but also making them aware I saw them. Be friendly, not naive. Be polite, but don't trust. Observing them, I felt unsettled. The crowd was moving around them. They didn't speak to one another. They only seemed to move as I glanced away. I was alarmed, but only made a mental note to keep an eye on them. Continued down the stairs and jumped into the soft sand. My brother and I waited for the adults to pick a spot to set up before we took off swimming. Some time went by, and I saw the same men from earlier wade into the water quite some distance from us, and felt a bit silly for still worrying about them, but I couldn't just shake that uneasiness. I got out and took a rest by my mom. I didn't see the men anywhere, but the feeling of having eyes on me stayed. I chalked it up to paranoia and went back into the water after a few minutes. My brother had gone out of the water and started digging his magnificent sandpit, so I decided to use him as a landmark to determine my position in the water while riding in the waves. I did this a few times. Suddenly, goosebumps shot up my back. I looked around, and the same men were just a few meters away from me, waving and beckoning me towards them. I was having fun up until then, and hadn't noticed them approaching. Adrenaline set in as I saw them smiling once more. Their eyes seemed to be blank, insincere, and out of place with those huge grins. I nervously grinned back and just shook my head at their invitation to come closer. I'm sure the fear was written all over my face, though. As if to confirm my fear was of their intention, they started towards me. I knew I wouldn't be strong enough in the water to fight, run, or swim. Nobody was close enough to hear me call out. As I was panicking, the water suddenly pulled me deeper into the ocean. A big wave was coming. I placed my boogie board in position and started paddling. I was now further into the ocean than the creeps. The wave hit and they were about 1 meter away. It took me right past them. I felt relieved for a split second, but then felt a hand grabbing and yanking my ankle hard. My heart caught in my throat. I kicked out of instinct. Fortunately, being sunscreen dosed, I was slippery and managed to get free instantly. The wave carried me all the way to the beach. I was coughing with a mouthful of seawater, but scampered to my feet and ran to fetch my brother. I told him I'd race back to Mom, and he was delighted for the challenge. I glanced back from where the sea had just ejected me. The creeps were still standing where they were, still smiling and waving. I stayed at my mom's side until we finally packed up to head home. As we walked to our car, I looked over my shoulder, and there they were. Two grown men, staring and smiling and waving at a child they had tried to grab like nothing was weird. Then they turned around and disappeared into the crowd. This was in the late 2000s. I don't remember exactly the year, and it happened to my then wife and myself in our home. We lived in a nice quiet area. Our home was at the end of a road. In front of our house there was obviously the road. On each side we had neighbors whose homes were anywhere from 50 to 100 feet away. On the back of the house it was woods for miles and miles. We used to love seeing all the wildlife that would enter our property at one time or another, but as I said, the biggest plus was how peaceful it was. It was winter time in southern Massachusetts. A cloudy night but no storms. It was around 11:30 at night. We were in our living room just watching some movie. I was relaxing on an easy chair. My wife was sitting on a small couch about 6 feet from me. There was no noise but for the movie going on, and all of a sudden there was a flash. Everything went all white for a tiny fraction of a second. And when that was over, something was very different. You see, that room was a really huge addition that the house's previous owner had done, I guess, sometime in the 90s. They built that and a sizable deck outside. The room was very large and had a cathedral ceiling, which at its tops must have easily reached 15 feet. On the ceiling, there was a bunch of small lights and a skylight. Being nighttime, the skylight looked like a black square, and the lights were providing great illumination. Courtesy of a dimmer, the lights were just right, not too strong, not too weak. Well, right after that flash had gone, I looked up at the ceiling, and what I saw froze me in place. Gone were the lights. Gone was the square skylight that was dark because it was night. Starting from about 7 feet up from the floor, there was what looked like an inverted pool of what looked like, for the lack of better words, milk. But it had a strange glow to itself. I watched fascinated as this white stuff rippled gently with small waves, like it was a really thick liquid. My mind was horrified and curious at the same time, because I couldn't think of any phenomenon that would have caused what I was seeing. A pool of glowing milk, lazily rippling, suspended above our heads. I immediately thought I must have imagined that, and to get confirmation that I wasn't having some medical emergency that made me see things, I looked at my wife, who was on the couch. She was staring at the same thing, with her mouth open. All of a sudden, in another flash, in a blink of an eye, that pool with white stuff wasn't there any longer. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, and everything had gone back to normal. My wife looked at me wild-eyed, and I said, "Did you just see that?" And she said yes. I asked her what she thought it was, and she said she had no idea. I dabbled with the idea that it was some odd lightning thing, but there wasn't any storm, and I'm not aware of any natural phenomenon with these characteristics. Nothing was damaged, and what we saw looked damn solid. As I said, the consistency and the look of regular milk. I remember thinking that the ripples or little waves I was seeing in that stuff was something they had hit in your body, and you have really felt them. It felt like whatever this was, it had substance. In any case, this really spooked me big time.